And welcome back to the Hot Lap, where we are talking Singapore qualifying. We are talking Carlos Sainz on pole again. It's getting a bit boring, isn't it? These Ferraris getting on pole. We're talking Max Verstappen not making it into Q3 and pretty much braking at the time of recording. Also, didn't have a penalty. What do you mean? We'll get into that in a bit. But there we go. Here's the grid here. We got Carlos Sainz on pole, but let's go to the winners and losers first, though. Obviously, Lance Stroll, the biggest winner and loser at the same time, because, yes, it was an epic crash of epic proportions. However, thank goodness he is okay. You have to wonder. I mean, we see crashes a lot, and you've got to wonder, even 10 years ago, would it have been different? Would it have been different without the halo? Thank goodness we're never going to find out. Well done, Lance Stroll. He is in the race. He's been given the go-ahead, I believe, by doctors. And 19th is the newly contracted Zhao, not doing particularly well as Logan Sargent. Again, in the Williams, not shining a light, really. Let's be honest. It's Logan Sargent. I mean, I think at this point, surely, unless he has an amazing performance between now and the last race, his season is going to be it, and his career in Formula One could potentially be over. That's the most likely scenario for him. Oscar Piastri, well, he kind of got screwed. As much as Piastri got screwed, Lewis Hamilton was the one I think that got saved with that red flag lap from Lance Stroll. Because I think had that red flag happened a bit later, Hamilton could have even been out of Q1. But alas, it was Oscar Piastri was the sacrifice there. And that McLaren, he doesn't have the go faster bits, for example, that his teammate Lando Norris does. They estimate maybe 0.3 of a difference. But it will be interesting because we'll see what he's made of. This is a hard track anyway, and a very hard track to overtake. Not Monaco levels of hard, but it's got to be up there in the top 3 hardest tracks to overtake. Bottas in 16th, out qualifying his teammate, kind of as you'd expect. Yuki Tsunoda being blocked by his, not really teammate, his sister car, let's say, Max Verstappen. And also, interestingly, being out qualified by Liam Lawson, but we'll get into that. Alex Albon, 14th. It's funny, isn't it? At the beginning of the season without Williams, 14th, you'd kind of think that's not too bad. But now, in 2023 at the Singapore Grand Prix, as we're getting in the twilight, in the evening of the season, let's say, it's disappointing, isn't it? It's disappointing. Sergio Perez, well, he's used to being disappointing, but I don't think we could completely blame Perez in 13th place because that Red Bull was really struggling for grip. Was it the tyres? Was it the fact they couldn't get the car set up right? Was it the new technical directive? 12th, Pierre Gasly, kind of like whereabouts you kind of expect the Alpine. 11th, Max Verstappen, the biggest shock, I think, of the year. Red Bull coming here and not doing very well. But I do remember that this was very much happened to Mercedes as well, didn't it? Mercedes really struggling here, I think in 2015, maybe 2019, being the fastest car, happily being the fastest car, and just struggling at Singapore. And I think Mercedes have also struggled in the past in their dominant years at Monaco. So I mentioned this new technical directive. However, could it be the fact it is just the track, this type of track? Maybe. I think we won't really find out until Suzuka, but I'm sure we'll be talking about it between now and Suzuka. Could Max Verstappen win the race? Yes. Their race pace, I think, is one of the fastest. I think it all depends on how good his start is. The safety cars, how hard it is to pass here. And so he kind of needs a bit of luck. Some of it might be out of his control, but if he does win, fair play to him, and it's going to be one of his best victories, isn't it? And also, we've seen Max Verstappen very flustered on the radio. Understandably, I mean, this guy's won the last 10 races in a row, just like we've seen Lewis Hamilton flustered. But I think Max Verstappen gets a bit more sweary, let's say, on the radio. But it's in the heat of the moment, isn't it? So 10th, yes, potentially. I mean, we've got Sainz. We'll get into Russell. as well, who's second, but potentially the man of qualifying. I mean, he's out-qualified the Red Bulls. Yes, the Red Bulls were struggling. He's out-qualified his teammate. And he's the only Red Bull car, Red Bull branded car, let's say, that's made it into the top 10. He basically bumped Verstappen out. Liam Lawson. And this is where I think he span maybe in practice 3. But he wasn't, I would not say he wasn't setting the world alight, but this was going to be a really interesting weekend because this is a very hard track, as everyone says. But he qualified 10th. A massive world one. To me, probably the man of qualifying, despite how epic size his lap was. Nico Hülkenberg again. Not the man, but a man, let's say, of qualifying. Well done in that Haas Ferrari. But the Ferraris are going strong here as well. I mean, Hülkenberg, really, really, not bad, but not as good as his teammate, but not bad at all. Another man of qualifying. Ocon, 8th in the Alpine Renault. Good. That car is so inconsistent, isn't it? Fernando Alonso, 7th. We kind of thought, maybe some people expected, or that the Aston Martin would be doing better here. I mean, it didn't do too bad at Monaco. Bearing in mind that seems like an age ago now, doesn't it? Kevin Magnussen in 6th. Not bad with the Haas Ferrari. One of the men's of qualifying. I mean, he's done really well. And it's normally Hülkenberg up there getting the big results. So well done, Kevin Magnussen. 5th, Lewis Hamilton. I think he'll be disappointed with that, and we'll get into his opinion. We've got a bit of news on that, because he's 4/10 off George Russell, who qualified 2nd. And this, I wouldn't say this is his bogey. This is his bogey track here, but he has struggled, I think, against. I think he's struggled against Bottas or Rosberg in the past here as well. But Toto Wolff suggested that he might be a lot stronger in the race, so we'll see. And I think a lot of it with his race also depends on that start. Lando Norris in 4th. At one point he was on the front row, and it is really, really quite close between the top 4. It's basically within 2 tenths, a tenth and a half. Really, really close, and a couple of tenths back to Lewis. But Lando Norris 4th. Charles Leclerc 3rd, beaten again by Carlos Sainz. What must he be feeling? This is the number 1 driver at Ferrari. This is the wonder child of the Ferrari team. This is going to be the leader of the Ferrari team. What must he be thinking? I don't think too much at the moment, but if Sainz end up beating him in the race again and winning, and being the first Ferrari driver to win this year and the first driver to beat, if this happens, Red Bull's streak, it's going to be interesting. And I think Carlos Sainz is really stamping his authority on another Ferrari contract, should he wish. George Russell 2nd, one of the other men in qualifying. Absolutely fantastic in a car that I think should at least probably be behind the Ferraris, because those Ferraris were really, really good. What a solid lap that George Russell did. And you got to wonder, if I was Carlos Sainz, I would rather have Leclerc alongside me than George Russell, because George Russell, given a chance, like a Max, like a Lewis, he's going neck and neck if he has a chance into that first corner. And Carlos Sainz, what a lap. Well done, that Ferrari driver. But let's get into the fact that Max Verstappen could have been punished times 3, let's say, and he hasn't even got a grid position. He's not even got a grid punishment, let's say. This is from gpfans.com, from Joe Ellis. This is updated about 10 minutes ago, at the time as I'm recording this. So Max Verstappen, he's avoided a grid penalty for impeding other drivers in qualifying for the Singapore Grand Prix. He basically got away with 2 reprimands of £5,000 fine for the team. It's interesting. I don't know. I think the fine should come out of the budget cap. But there we go. Anyway, moving on. The runaway championship leader was noted for impeding after he sat stationary at the end of the pit lane with no cars preventing him from heading out the track. He just sat there. He was trying to create a gap for his qualifying effort and was handing his first driver reprimand, but it suggests this wasn't the end. He also held up Yuki Tsunoda. This led to another €5,000 fine, and was investigated a 3rd time for interfering with Logan Sargent on the Americans' outlap. Now, on that 3rd count, the FIA statement read, "The driver of car 1 stated he was surrounded by many other cars on preparation laps, some of those who chose to overtake him on the left and some on the right, and therefore he decided the safest option was for him to drive straight, keep the line, leaving a car width on his right. He stated he felt any movement from the left to right would have caused a collision with one of the cars around him. The stewards accept these statements. They basically said the driver of car 2 stated that he did not believe that the driver of car 1 was at fault and that there was room for him to pass. We therefore determined the driver of car 1, I think Max Verstappen, did not unnecessarily impede car 2. Now, for the first time this season, as we know, Red Bull are not head and shoulders above the rest. I'm really surprised, especially with the Yuki Tsunoda impeding. I thought that was pretty much a stone bonker. He was definitely getting one. So I feel that the stewards were particularly kind to Max Verstappen, and I think with those three things, I feel I'd have put a lot of money on him getting at least one 3-place grid penalty. So maybe every cloud, I think, for Max has a silver lining, and it would have been interesting. And I don't want to. Is it really controversial? But it would have been interesting had he qualified in pole, whether that would have changed, whether he would have received the penalty. It's really sad that I think that. But it's interesting, isn't it? But more on Max. He said Red Bull left stunned by shocking Singapore Grand Prix qualifying as dominant F1 pace vanishes. This is on Sky Sports F1. Max Verstappen basically said, I knew it would always be tough to put it on pole, but this I didn't expect, says Max Verstappen. After Red Bull suffer shock double Q2 elimination. Verstappen, as we know, is going to start from 11th, with Sergio Perez starting from 13th. Verstappen lamented it basically as a shocking experience, driving his car and qualifying with Red Bull's basically crushing form, suddenly deserting them. Now, on a dismal and fraught qualifying, under the Marina Bay floodlights, Verstappen and Perez were struggling, and you could see Max struggling with his car, even at turn 3 on one of his fast. It was sliding. I mean, even Max made a joke saying if this race was all about drifting, he'd probably win. And it's the first time in 5 years that both teams' cars have dropped out of qualifying before the pole shootout in Q3. Now, what was wrong with Max's car? Well, Christian Horner has offered an explanation for this bizarre performance, or at least tried, as to why Red Bull failed. This is from planetf1.com. Now, with both Red Bull drivers knocked out in Q2, Christian Horner has admitted that neither RB19 was ever in the correct operating window and poured cold water on the suggestion that a recent technical directive had scuppered their pace. Now, the reigning world champions, having won every race so far this year, face a huge challenge to continue that streak, although I do not think it's impossible. Just made a lot more difficult with the fact that Max Verstappen is currently 11th. In the middle of the grid, anything can happen there at the start. So Horner says it just isn't happening with the RB19 this weekend. Now, speaking to Sky F1 following this session, Horner tried to put a brave face on it, and he's basically said, yeah, it's very, very confusing to have dropped the amount of pace we've had, he said. The car is just not responding to changes. You can hear this understeer, oversteer braking issues. It's like we haven't managed to get the tyre into the right working window. But someone that did is George Russell. This is from motorsport.com. Yeah, Russell has said he's in an exciting place with his Singapore F1 tyre advantage. What do you mean by that? Well, George Russell believes he's in an exciting place because he's got a strategic advantage of an extra set of medium tyres compared to Ferrari. Now, the Briton produced a superb lap, as we know, in Q3, beating Charles by just 7 thousandths of a second to line up alongside Carlos Sainz. Now, Ferrari is headed all 3 practice sessions, and qualifying on a weekend that, as we know, Red Bull have struggled. However, Russell believes Mercedes is in this good position to challenge for a first win of the season. This is due to their strategy. And speaking after qualifying, as we know, he said he's really happy. He said the team did a great job with that strategy. He also said we're on an offset strategy compared to everyone else. We've got an extra set of medium tyres tomorrow, which nobody around us has. So, to get to Q3 and be on the front row with a strategic advantage tomorrow is an exciting place to be. And Russell explained that because tyre degradation during that Friday's practice session, it did look pretty bad, he said. There'd be a high chance that his extra tyres could play to the team's advantage. He said, I think it's going to be a very close between a 1 and 2 stop. With our mediums, we can put Ferrari in a difficult position and try to force them into an error, get the upper hand. So that's what we're looking for. And also, say, for example, you have like a safety car or a late safety car. they have that option then to put the medium tyres on where other people potentially won't. So, last but not least, Lewis Hamilton. He's basically said, this is from planetf1.com by Jamie Woodhouse, just so slow. Yes, Hamilton passes Mercedes victory hopes to George Russell. Hamilton hopes George Russell can go and score a first Mercedes victory of the year in Singapore. Now, as we know, Russell has had the upper hand on Hamilton throughout qualifying at Marina Bay, ultimately falling just shy of getting that pole position. That honour, as we know, went to Sainz. Now, speaking to Sky F1, Hamilton said that the Mercedes W14 is proving to be a great package in Singapore, but admitted it was Russell who got the best out of it rather than himself. As we know, Hamilton starts P5. And with Red Bull out of all sorts of the weekend, neither Max nor Sergio making it into Q3, Hamilton hopes Russell can drive on to victory from the front row, with Red Bull having won every race so far in F1 2023. He said, I think today we had a really great package here. The car was feeling incredible yesterday, said Hamilton, and there was so much hope that some tweaks we would be able to challenge the Ferraris. Obviously, one of the cars was able to do that, but I wasn't. We made big changes overnight, and it just went away from me again. I was just too slow today. He went on to say, so it was definitely, obviously, disappointing, but tomorrow is a new day, so I really hope George gets a great start tomorrow and puts some pressure on those Ferraris. It would be great for him to get a win. So, but as we know, the story goes on interestingly about Lewis Hamilton. He's urged to see the positives, and as we know, it's not been an easy ride since Abu Dhabi. But Danica Patrick believes Hamilton should see the positives. Acknowledging that Hamilton was down in the dumps being on P5, she said it was not long ago that such a result would have been a strong one by Hamilton as Mercedes attempt to claw their way back. He said, George has just been really consistently faster than Lewis, and I think she's talking about this weekend. But how good has George Russell been since the summer break? But, you know, I actually look at this and think Lewis is bummed, really disappointed that he had a 5th place in qualifying. He said he was way off, but not that long ago, he would have been happy with that. Now, with Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso set to start 2 places behind him on the grid, Hamilton does have a good opportunity to close in on the Spaniard who holds P3 in that championship, the gap between them being only 6 points. So there we go. I mean, there we have it. There's essentially our qualifying. I don't think it changes the starting grid too much. No, there's no obvious there's no penalties there. So we have Sainz on pole, George Russell alongside, Charles Leclerc in 3rd, Lando Norris in 4th. He could be a surprise, couldn't he? And Lewis Hamilton in 5th. One of those, along with maybe a Max Verstappen, is likely to be our race winner. Could Max win? Absolutely, he could. But I think he needs a bit of luck, and he needs to absolutely go all out. And it would be a really impressive victory if he does. But I think it's definitely safe to say, going into this race, it's so far this season, it's Red Bull's most difficult. It's the best chance of another team to take that streak off Red Bull. And we will see on Sunday tomorrow. But this has been the Hot Lap. Like and subscribe, please. Any like, every subscribe, I answer every comment. It's fantastic, and I know it sounds really cheesy and cliche, but it does warm my heart every time we get I get a like or a comment or a subscribe. It does make it worth doing. I really enjoy doing this. And if you listen, even for a couple of minutes anyway, thank you so much, even just for watching or listening. This has been the Hot Lap. We'll speak to you soon.